So Bitcoin is touted as a decentralized currency and digital gold. So I'm wondering, with the banks buying it up or hedge funds buying it up and it being the next best thing since sliced bread, and then XRP also being touted as the next level of currency to be used by the general public, get in while you can, kind of FOMO um, messaging that's going on. What's your take on XRP and Bitcoin whilst being on a blockchain and supposedly decentralized? Is it really, or is it moving towards trying to entrap people in programmable CBDC type digital currency down the track?
Mm-hmm. Brilliant question. So, this is classic. Answer in 3 minutes, Jake. So I've spent the last 5 years studying Bitcoin, really deeply. And I first bought some in 2015, sold some 2016, sold some 2017. 2020 comes around, and I then realized it's actually the best investment I'd ever owned. It sat in self-custody the whole time. No one can take it from me. There's a fixed supply of 21 million. You cannot be debased in the same way that an Aussie dollar or a euro or a pound
Yeah.
can be. And it was the best investment I'd already ever made. And then I saw stock listed companies putting it onto their balance sheets and calling them corporate treasuries. And since the last 5 years, the Bitcoin space specifically has just exploded. And the pace of adoption of Bitcoin specifically is faster than the internet. And I've been and traveled to places like Bali. I went to the Indonesian Bitcoin conference and was an MC there. There are people in Indonesia, people in Malaysia, people in Singapore, people in Vietnam with broken financial systems. The Philippines, something like 1.4 billion people globally are completely unbanked. And they're unbanked because they don't have passports, they don't have driver's license. They cannot access the financial system. So for me, the most important thing to do is ask the question, what is money? And that takes you down a history lesson. So money to me now is, first of all, if you take that history lesson, we used to use glass beads, we used to use shells, we used to use certain types of stones. It eventually evolved into commodity money. So we would use gold or silver or bronze. And in the last 100 or so years, that's then moved into what we now call fiat currency. And so when you ask the question, what is money? Money typically has a set of characteristics that make a good money. So is it durable? Is it divisible? Is it portable? Is it scarce? And there's a whole library, essentially, of economic study on that question, what is money? And money, to me, is something that rises from the free market and is something that anyone can choose. So I could try and use this water bottle as money, but actually it's quite difficult to send to you right now in cyberspace. And it's also very easy to replicate. So that's actually not a very good money. Or I could try and use grain. Well, grain, it perishes quite quickly. So that's actually not very good store of value over time. Or I could try and use this chair, or I could try and use humans. You could use anything as money, but certain things seem to rise to the top of the marketplace as the best types of money. In my opinion, gold is the best form of money that's ever been used. And gold failed. And gold failed because it's good at storing value over time, but not sending it across space. So how do you chop up a gold bar? You can't very easily chop it up, right? To try and draw a conclusion to it, the Bitcoin is the latest iteration of humans looking for something that is a good money. And so money solves the double coincidence of wants problem. I.e., when we traded apples and oranges, or the back leg of a deer that I just got, or you fished a fish, if you want a 1-for-1 trade, great. But what happens if you actually only want half a fish, or you only want the hoof of the cow? It doesn't work. So money is something that rose as a technology to solve the problem of double coincidence of wants. And there's then the school of Austrian economics that you can go and study. And a guy called Karl Menger was writing about the origins of money, late 1800s in Vienna. It's a massive, massive subject. And so to me, in that history lesson of gold, silver, before that beads, then into modern currency like the euro or the pound or the yen, Bitcoin is the latest iteration of that. And to me is the future base layer of the financial system. The reason I know it's decentralized is because I can go and look at the blockchain. I can see how many nodes are being operated globally. And I know that it hasn't changed in terms of its rule set for 15 years. That gives me great confidence that it's the future of money. You mentioned XRP. That is a altcoin. XRP, Ethereum, Polkadot, they are all highly speculative software projects that are basically recreating what a central bank does.
Mm.
And to give you an analogy to what we touched on in terms of using nature to help the body heal, to me, Bitcoin is backed by energy. So you have to use real world resources to mine Bitcoin to get paid for calculating the transactions. XRP, euros, pounds, they are basically things that can be printed whenever they want. So the guy that runs XRP, he can change the algorithm whenever he wants. He can change the blockchain whenever he wants. He can issue more of these things whenever he wants. It is a well-dressed, highly marketed scam that I would never recommend anyone puts any money into. And I focus entirely on Bitcoin. Basically, Bitcoin's the closest thing to nature we have seen when it comes to money. And things like XRP are a heavy intervention that papers over the problem and actually creates more. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Oh,
That was
a real rant, wasn't it? 5 minutes.
That was a really great explanation. Another question to that is that, yeah, XRP. Okay, so you're basically saying it's been marketed to be the best thing since sliced bread, but it's not. Is it something that could be converted into a programmable currency in which to control people, say, with a social credit system?
What you're asking about XRP specifically?
Yeah, XRP specifically,
I
or
don't-
anything
I
like
don't-
that.
I don't know, but the evolution of the central bank digital currency proposals are at different stages with different countries, and it's a really interesting discussion. The truth is, in my mind, like, they're already kind of doing it, right? So the money printing, whether they call it quantitative easing, whether they call it stimulus, even here in Australia, the Royal Bank of Australia they're printing money, and they're doing it literally with like the click of a button on a keypad. So in some ways, it's already digital, right?
Yeah.
And therefore, like, CBDC, like programmable money, yes, in theory, it would be much worse for them to have complete control of the currency you're using, i.e., you use too much carbon, now we're going to stop you from spending any money. Or look, you weren't supposed to be in that part of the country, now we're going to stop you from spending money. But let's be honest, there's already real world examples of extreme financial repression, even in supposedly liberal Western democracies, such as the Canadian Freedom Truckers rally,
Yes.
where people were sending them Bitcoin and sending them donations through platforms like GoFundMe, and the Canadian government just shut them down. So they froze their bank accounts. And why wouldn't the Australian government do that, right? Let's say there was some other spurious disease that sprung up. The chief health officers again rose to the challenge and put all these big enforcement laws in. And suddenly they're like, you were spending money in somewhere that's this far from your home where your registered address is. Right, Westpac's closing your account. They could already do that if they wanted to. I didn't touch on this earlier, but money to me does three things, which is a store of value, a medium of exchange, and a unit of account. And the money that we inherited was pure fiat currency since 1971, when the US dollar was taken off the gold standard. So we've never had a money that exhibited the feature store of value, because they're printing more and more of it. Each year, your $10 buys you less stuff. So really how you have to look at every investment you ever make is through the lens of purchasing power. So if you invest into this thing, whether it is Aussie dollars, whether it is gold, whether it is Bitcoin, will you have more purchasing power a year from now or less? And so it's about re-engineering your lens. And in a world in which Bitcoin does all three of those things, it is then able to receive money, send money, and store money. And you don't need to have anything except for an internet connection. So if you have an internet connection, you can sign up, get a Bitcoin wallet, and you can start send, receive, and store value. And it's completely outside of the digitized banking system that already exists. And so it is permissionless peer-to-peer money. And in my mind, it's about the most important technology innovation at our fingertips today that it couldn't come at a better time. Like how dystopian the world is becoming. You can't say certain things online. You got to put certain stuff in your body to comply with the government. You can't go to certain places because you said the wrong thing or you didn't do the right thing according to the health officer. It's wild. And to me, Bitcoin is this incredible antidote that has come out of the free market that, to me, it is freedom. It is hope. And by traveling to other countries, talking to people, meeting them, seeing their use case for it, it solves different problems for different people in different places. And you've got to go and kill every single person in the world that currently uses Bitcoin. And that's just never going to happen. So yeah, very, very bullish long term. And as it's about 15 or so years into its life, I think we're just getting to that stage where within 5 years from now, it'll be widely accepted as like the base case for global currency. We're just not quite there yet. So you need to have seen a few things in your lifetime to suddenly go, oh, maybe this thing does make sense.
And then my final question is,
Please.
Can it be controlled ever by the central banks, or does it remain decentralized and for the people?
Great question. So I'm always an advocate for like, what did you do? So I don't mind if you have an opinion on something, please share it. If you went and did some work and you figured something out, please share it. You do not need to be an expert, quote unquote, to have a valid opinion. And my view on this is quite simple, which is that there's a brilliant book called The Block Size Wars. It was written around the 2017 period, and it was all about the size of every block in the blockchain. And it's quite small. And there's only a very small amount of transactions that can get onto each one. And each one is only processed every 10 minutes. And what that means is that the ability for Bitcoin to be a payments network that generates enough payments like a Visa or a MasterCard, it could never do it on the base blockchain, ever, because the block's too small. So there was this big argument about big blocks versus small blocks. And the resounding winner from that argument was that the network participants voted for small blocks. So what this means is that you and I at home with a small amount of computing power can plug in a Bitcoin node. And with that, we then have every single transaction that's ever happened on Bitcoin since 2009. And it makes it incredibly difficult to kill. So I don't know how many Bitcoin nodes are currently live, but it's going to be thousands, like 30, 40,000 around the world. You'd have to find every single one of them and destroy them completely in order to get rid of the Bitcoin network. If one of them survives, gets back online, you can then replicate the entire Bitcoin ledger of what's happened in the past. And so for someone to co-opt it and say that that isn't real, very, 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 very hard. The way I would look at Bitcoin is it is a system of rules in which we are ruled by the rules and not by the rulers. In the fiat system, the bigger the player that you are, the more you can influence the law, the more money you can get hold of, the more that you dictate what happens. And so Bitcoin's the inverse of that. Why couldn't it be co-opted? Well, first of all, to go and change the historical transactions requires you to find every single node and basically update every single one at the same time with what you want. And that costs an insane amount of energy. And this is why it's very important that Bitcoin itself is connected to real world assets. And so Bitcoin miners are these specific things called an ASIC, which is like a hardware device. And they are running on all sorts of different energy sources around the world. And you'd basically have to somehow re-update the Bitcoin nodes with your information, which requires consensus of the whole network. And basically, no one's going to agree. There's too much sunk cost from the players that incentivizes them to actually move in the direction they want. In fact, I'll tie it up with this. Bitcoin is a extraordinary combination of positive incentive alignment, such that I've never seen anything like it in my life. So every single network participant benefits from how they're incentivized to behave. And that, for me, is the ultimate reason why it won't be possible for someone who can print their own money to come in and just co-opt it and then basically get people to do what they want.
Okay.
And again, it's a huge topic, Symmone. So I would highly recommend you to to keep digging and to ask the question, what is money? And the fun thing about doing that is it brings a very simple first principles approach to it. And with that understanding, you're then able to make, high conviction decisions.
What a brilliant explanation. Thank you.
No, that's my pleasure.
Yeah, your explanation kind of points to, no, it can't be co-opted. No, central bankers can't redefine or recreate another enslavement system like they have with the fiat system. And thereby we're entering into an age where peer-to-peer transactions and our freedom is now at the forefront, where we have the empowerment and the ability to create a future we want without being controlled or manipulated or in scarcity or in poverty because of the upper echelons of power that deem it so.
Andrew came on my podcast a couple of weeks ago. He's written an excellent book with his mates. He's an academic, so it's highly researched, called Resistance Money. And it's basically a philosophical analysis of Bitcoin that puts you in the shoes of, okay, let's say tomorrow morning you get taken out of who you are today and you get put in the shoes randomly of one of the 8 billion people on Earth. You have no choice who that person is. Let's think about whether or not Bitcoin would be a good thing for that person or a bad thing for that person. And what it manages to do is highlight excellently that having a money that is not possible to be co-opted by centralized figures is a net benefit for the world. Now, I'm not a Russian dissident, but if I woke up tomorrow and I had a problem with the politics of Russia, I'd want to be able to transact in the economy. If I couldn't, that'd be a big problem. Tomorrow, I might wake up as a female in a part of the world where you're not even allowed a bank account. Or maybe I'd like a bank account. And so often I think what it highlights is that the financial privilege of many people that just poo-poo Bitcoin straight away, well, they get access to a credit card, they can get a mortgage, they can go and buy whatever they need. They don't live in a financially broken system. And like I touched on before, 1.4 billion people are unbanked. Well, let's say tomorrow morning you wake up and you're completely unbanked. You'd quite like to be able to get a wallet that can receive money, send money, and store money.